YouTube is currently live streaming council meetings, and speakers here tonight will be included in the audio, not the video. If you do have any concerns with this, please speak to a council officer. The council officers are located behind you. Recording of council meetings. In accordance with Local Law 1, please be advised that a person must not operate audio tape or other recording equipment in any council meeting without first obtaining the consent of council or the chair. Such consent may at any time during the course of such meeting be revoked by council. Now, I should point out at this point that a gentleman has asked, can he record one item on the agenda? And whilst that doesn't worry me, I have pointed out to him that the recording of the entire meeting will be available on YouTube immediately after the meeting. So he has decided not to record on that basis. Councillors, apologies. Everybody is here, so no apologies. Any declarations of interest, councillors? Councillor O'Callaghan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A declaration on item 14.1. All of the paperwork and reason for declaration has been provided to the officers in advance of the meeting.
Thank you. Any other councillor?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I've got two. Item 14.1, I have an interest, no conflict. Information has been provided to the officers. And item 15.1, I have a direct conflict of interest and will be leaving the room.
Thank you. Any other councillors with conflicts? No. Move on, councillors, to page 4 of the agenda, the adoption of the minutes of the previous council meeting, which was on 3rd of June 2019. Moving, Councillor Gibson.
Move.
Second, Councillor McFarlane, thanks for that. Any opposition? No opposition. Nobody wish to speak? In that case, carried unanimously. Acknowledgements, councillors. Councillors may raise any formal acknowledgements that need to be made at this time. Councillor Harriman.
I have two, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Troggan T-Bird basketballer and Latrobe City Energy basketballer Chelsea D'Angelo, who's been picked in the Australian Under-19, I believe, team, which is currently travelling to Asia to play, which I think is a great achievement for a local basketball prodigy that has decided to stay local. I believe she's also now playing with the Melbourne Boomers, and it's one of the reasons that they keep coming down to play here as part of the family connection they have to this area. My second acknowledgement, Mr Mayor, is for the North Gippsland Football Netball League, and in particular David Dirty Kyle, who's the president of the league and their committee. Over the last 2 weekends, they have run 2 very special rounds. Last weekend, just gone, they ran the Are You OK round and provided a lot of assistance and a lot of promotional activities for those that might be suffering from depression, and to make it an awareness that it is something that a lot of people suffer, that it's okay to admit that you're fighting depression, but also for the rest of the community to come along and support those and actually look after their friends by asking, are you okay? And 2 weekends ago, for the 3rd year, the league ran the Pride round and an inclusion round. It was run for the 3rd year at TTU, Troggan Tyres United Football Netball Club. This year was an absolutely brilliant event, one of the largest crowds we've ever got to a North Gippsland Football League game. And with the inclusiveness, it was great to see that we had the NDIS represented, we had disability sports represented. Troggan Tennis Club, who also need a bit of a shout out, were there with Hot Shots, which is junior tennis and disabled tennis. Some members of the TTU Footy Club are running the Oz Kick, so they had the Oz Kickers there at half time, running around on the ground. So in general, it was an absolutely brilliant weekend. It went across very, very well, and part of the Pride round, or part of what has been achieved by David Kyle, is that they've just received a national award, and Councillor Clancy will help me out with what it was?
The Ally of the Year.
Ally of the Year, which was an award for their work in inclusiveness and in particular running the Pride round. So I would like to acknowledge David Dirty Kyle and his committee at the North Gippsland Football League. I'd also like to acknowledge Brett Nielsen and the committee at TTU Football Netball League. and all the work they've done over the last 2 weekends. I think it's absolutely fantastic and shows what can happen when members of the community put their heads together and try and include everybody. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harriman. Any other councillor wish to forward an acknowledgement? If not, we'll move on to the public question time. Mr CEO, do we have any questions?
We do, Mr Mayor. A number of questions tonight. The first is from Lorraine Di Pietrantonio. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Thanks, Lorraine. She's in the audience. Did chat with her earlier. It's related to the future of aged and disability services. So the first question is, what consultation has or does council plan to undertake with residents, both those who are currently utilising services and other residents, in order to obtain feedback and concerns with council potentially withdrawing from aged care services? So in response, once council have considered all options in relation to the future of aged and disability services, a comprehensive communication plan will be implemented with both current clients and the broader community. And the second question again relates to the future of aged and disability services. The question is, have council further explored other service delivery models for aged care, such as partnering with other councils and or exploring alternatives to withdrawing from service delivery? So in response, council has engaged an external consultant to assist us to undertake a full service review of aged and disability services, which identified a range of options to be presented to council. One of the options canvassed was to consider a partnership approach to service delivery, specifically partnering with other local councils. The third question is from Mr Merv Geddes. It's related to the asbestos task force. And the question is, when was the task force established? And in response, the establishment of the Latrobe Valley Asbestos Task Force was an election commitment from the Labor State Government. The first meeting of the task force took place on 28th of February 2019. The fourth question, again from Mr Geddes, relates to the Asbestos Task Force. The question is, who are the community representatives? And in response, the Latrobe Valley Asbestos Task Force brings together a range of stakeholders, including state and local government authorities, worker representatives and community groups. It should be noted this is not a Latrobe City Commission committee. Membership includes representatives from agencies and stakeholders, including Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, WorkSafe Victoria, EPA, Department of Health and Human Services, the Latrobe Health Assembly, Latrobe Valley Authority, Latrobe City Council, Wellington City Shire Council, Baw Baw Shire Council, Asbestos Council, Gippsland Asbestos Related Disease Support Group, Guards, Australian Manufacturing Workers Union, the CFMEU, Electrical Trades Union, Australian Workers Union, Australian Services Union and Gippsland Waste and Resource Recovery Group. Other authorities and agencies include Gippsland Water, Victorian Building Authority, Municipal Association Victoria may be invited to attend those sessions as well. Mr Geddes did have one other question and a statement more than a question. The fifth question was, when will a report be made to Latrobe City Council? So we'll provide a response in writing to Mr Geddes in relation to that one. And the fourth was a statement that the association was objected to a planning permit in 2017 and advised that the permit was denied in October 2018 and the matter is finalised, and they were not consulted on the attached agreement, which was published in Latrobe Valley Express in 9th of May 2019. We'll respond to that question in writing as well. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Moving down the agenda, item 8, items held over for report and or consideration. The details are in the agenda. We'll now move on to item 9.1, which is notices of motion. Public speakers. You think I've missed that? And I think you're right. Public speakers.
Leaving the room, Mr Mayor.
Leaving the room, Councillor O'Callaghan. I have a list of speakers here. I've got one, thanks, yes. First one is item 14.1, consideration of submissions and endorsement of the draft Ellervale East Development Plan. Mr John O'Brien. Are you there, Mr O'Brien? Just run through the rules, Mr O'Brien. You have 3 minutes to put your position to council, and at the end of the 3 minutes we'll ask you to stay there in case there are any questions from councillors.
Thank you. I'd like to thank council for the opportunity just to do this small presentation. Being a resident of Ellervale, you become aware of traffic movements within that estate. The road, according to the figures I have here, We have 3,700 vehicles a day in and out of there. The indicative maximum, which is the design of the road, was for 2,500. And with this new estate coming on, there's the likelihood of another 2,916. These are Beveridge William figures coming down that road. Now, it may not happen that way, but according to Beveridge Williams, there's going to be easterly directed roads going out onto Minnydale Road, and the travel distance from the estate, the new estate, to that Minnydale is 1.2 k's. So that forces people, if they want to go that way, they travel 1.2 k's up, then they've got to reach the highway, come 1.2 k's back, and they're at home on the highway, so to speak. So that's going to add like 3 kilometres to their journey into town, whereas the journey to the traffic lights at McDonald's and the car yard on the corner of the highway is 1.5 k's, so guess which way they're going to go. The other thing is that there's a huge amount of traffic goes along McNairn Road. We have the local traffic, but we also have highway trucks bypassing the traffic lights, and I realise that there may be a bypass put in, etc. But at this moment, you've got that problem, and also on the Glengarry Road, a new Woolworths will open, which will increase the traffic flow along McNairn again. So I wouldn't be against traffic lights going on the corner of Ellervale and McNairn. I think that would have to come into being at some point. Another problem that we personally have as a family and our neighbours, we live on the corner of Berkeley Court and Ellervale Drive, which is on the corner of quite a large bend when you're first coming into Ellervale. There's a constant, and I know this is a police problem more than yours, there's a constant speeding problem through that intersection. There's been quite a number of rollovers and incidents there. And there is a single white line with a brake for you to be able to enter Berkeley Court off Ellervale Drive. But if you're sitting on the inward leg to go into your home and have to do a righty across Ellervale, the cars coming up Ellervale from the east to west cut across that corner consistently. And I have asked council, I've even had the engineer have a look with me when they were redeveloping Ellervale Drive, to put double lines on that bend and maybe put a speed restriction through that bend, whether it's 80 metres this side, 80 metres the other side, and maybe reduce going through that bend to 40, because people do speed, and I say there's been rollovers and various traffic incidents on that corner. Do feel a little bit exposed in that way.
Mr O'Brien, you've just reached your time limit, but have you got long to go?
No, look, I think I've presented issues that I wanted to speak about.
Two councillors have risen, so we'll go through them.
Other three. Yep.
Moved, seconded. Councillors in favour of extending Mr O'Brien for 3 minutes? Carried. You have another 3 minutes.
Oh, look, it is just a fact for the safety of people in Ellervale. If the traffic out of that new estate can be directed by signage to exit via Melrossa maybe, so that a percentage of the traffic is eased off Ellervale Drive. And, you know, I'm being selfish, but, you know, it's the way it is. I think it would be probably advisable to have something in the order of city town centre via Minnydale Road and Shakespeare Street, just to sort of get a bit of diversion, because I feel that, in honesty, that the traffic volume will always be heading west. I can't see people adding another 3 kilometres to their trip to get into town by going towards Sale and then turning and coming back down. It just doesn't make sense. And as you know, we live in a busy society. People are pushed to the limit, you know, jobs, kids, everything else, and they're going to take the shortest route. So, look, that's about all I want to say. But that corner at Ellervale, to me, is a very dangerous one and needs to be addressed.
Okay, thanks, Mr O'Brien. If you'd like to stay there, we'll see if councillors have got any questions for you. Councillors, questions? Councillor Harriman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mr O'Brien, so with the estate, your main issues, if I can condense it, the corner going into your street, you'd like some sort of traffic calming devices put in there to slow people down?
Yes, either speed limit or whatever, yes.
Yep. and the other one would be traffic lights at the intersection of Ellavale-McNairn.
At some point in time, whether it be now or at a later date when the traffic volume does increase.
Yep.
But it's going to have to happen one day, there's no doubt about it.
Yep. No, so they're the two main. If I'm drawing the main concerns out, they're the two main
Yeah.
ones you've got.
Yeah, and try and spread the volume of traffic coming out of Ellavale Estate across a broader area. And
Yep.
I can't see the easterly two links that are going onto Minnydale Road being the ones.
Yep. No worries. Thank you for that. Muchly appreciated.
Any more questions, councillors? Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr O'Brien. So if they were addressed, you'd have no problem at all?
Look, you know, development's going to take place in the valley. There's no two ways about it. The only sad thing about the development is that we aren't seeing enough industry come here to employ our young people. So that's a big issue for the area. I was in business here for 37 years and, you know, your kids need jobs.
They do. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. John, you mentioned at Ellavale and McNairn, the intersection there, about the idea of traffic lights. That's what you said, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So equally, would you agree that if it was a roundabout rather than traffic lights, that would be equally acceptable?
Well, that's a good question because there's hardly enough space there to put a roundabout, you know, because of the way the entrance fences are and the power pole immediately opposite Ellavale exit. I think a roundabout would be a difficult one to contend with.
Another question?
No.
Are you right?
Just to...
Power poles and cars don't
Yeah,
mix.
so I suppose, I mean, put aside the impediments that you talk about, the fact that, you know, if the pole's in the way, we move it. If the fence is in the way, we move it. We get a roundabout instead.
I should imagine that would ease the situation anyway.
Councillors, further questions? On that basis, thanks very much, Mr O'Brien.
Thank you.
Our next speaker on the same item, that is 14.1, consideration of submissions and endorsement of the draft Ellavale East Development Plan, Mr Bruce Jeffrey. The rules as explained, Bruce, 3 minutes, and stay at the finish of your presentation for questions from councillors.
No worries. Thanks, Mr Mayor and councillors, for allowing us to come here and have our say. I handed over 3 forms. I'm talking for others that have had meetings with Dale and Kelly and some of the council staff.
Just for the record, Bruce, I'll read out their names. Jeff Warhope, Diane Pell and Barry Pell. You're speaking on behalf of 3 of the 3.
Jeff was sick and we didn't know whether he'd turn up, and now he has turned up. But if you want to ask him. But we're not here to try and stop the development. We're just here to make things, hopefully things will be better. There are a lot of people in the estate, and I've been talking to them for a while, that they're very surprised at what's going on. A retired National Parks officer who is also a resident of Ellavale is here tonight. That's Jeff. We now know Jeff's an ex-National Parks man, as I said. Endangered skinks live in the Loyang Creek. They've not been seen in Terrelgan before. They're out in other areas of Gippsland, and we want a full inquiry, independent inquiry, researchers to come in and have a look at what's going on. Jeff has spoken to DELP, Department of Environment, Land, Water, and they are surprised that they are in there, even though they know they're in other Gippsland areas. That's that part. Now we get to the roundabout at my house. Now, I'm not against this roundabout. I just want it built, not like the one that was done in Crinigan Road and Bridle Road in Morwell, because the council built the thing, and how many cars have gone through into the house on the corner, and I've got the same problem. I asked the council to put a speed hump, or they call it traffic calming device now. In our time, Darryl, it was a speed hump. They knocked me back because it's a future bus route. But I've got one either side of my house, so why can't we have one at the other end of it, of the, that's the skink that they've shown. And that's what, because I don't believe that, I'm not going to let my insurance company take the rap if it's not built properly. The other side of the roundabout, we believe that, talking to the others, believe it should be moved north, the road at the end of the roundabout, because it's impacting on the tree near the road, as you'll see in the plans. Here's the plans the council gave me. And also in that park, with the councillors, we pointed out there is a tree there, and Bruce Farmer informed me...
Excuse me, Bruce, could you stop a second just for procedural matter?
Move to extend, Mr Mayor.
Second, okay. All those in favour? Okay, you've got another 3 minutes, Bruce.
Thanks, Graham. Oh, I should say Mr Mayor.
Doesn't matter.
The tree there is over 200 years old, and that's from Bruce Farmer. Now, that must have been planted before Captain Cook landed in Sydney. So, we got, and it's, this is what the Beveridge Williams consultant. Cleared land provides opportunity for residential development with no impact on wildlife or habitat, yet the trees have birds nesting in them and other animals. And we want to know if the council can move the green belt from there right up on the eastern end of it over to where that tree is. Take some of about, well, it's half a hectare, move half a hectare of that to move it so that it's in, the tree is in that park and have it there. And that's what we're after, to save that tree. Now, the plan for this plan that Beveridge Williams have done is totally different to this one, because they've stated the tree across the road from 114 Ellervale, and I spoke to the people there. They were shocked at the trees to be removed. It's got a hollow in it and the birds live in there. You know, but why get rid of it when it's in the green belt? It's not hurting anybody. But yet this plan states it's staying, this plan states it's going. So who do we believe? You know, and it's just that, and then we get to Barry and Diane's house up at 144 Ellervale. They're going to put a T intersection in there. Yet 2 houses down from it, there's Ashley Court or Ashley Place. They should put a T intersection there. I spoke to Bruce at the Traralgon office and said, why he said, well, we didn't have it. We had it in Ashley Court. Why should they put the T intersection there, whereas their house butts onto it and the nighttime lights will get into their bedroom? You know, and it's not a very wide street, I'll tell you. It's about 2 or 3 metres less than what's in the big Ellervale where the other gentleman's talking. The road, it's just got out of hand. And the dam, now this is a beauty. Bob and Bruce have done a lot of work on that. That little dam, it only holds about enough water for 3 town swimming pools.
20 seconds, Bruce.
They want to get rid of it. Now, there's nothing wrong with that dam, and yet they reckon it doesn't conform to the rules. Well, the rules for the houses in Traralgon are the same, you know, and more. So we asked it a bit, and to tell you what, there was a pelican in there Saturday, because we always walk everybody. So I thank you very much for allowing. I know it's hard. So.
Okay, thanks very much, Bruce. I'm sure there are a number of questions for you. First question, Councillor Harriman.
Thanks for coming in, Bruce. Got a couple of questions for you. First one, if a councillor was to put up an alternate motion that included what's already in there, that we go ahead with the estate, but also put in that a speed cushion be implemented immediately to the south of the roundabout outside your place. Now, I think
it's got to be east of the roundabout.
East. I've got my directions wrong. I'll fix that.
Yeah.
East. Now, speed cushion, apparently the buses can go over, but it does slow down. Would you be... Yep. That every attempt is made to save the 2 trees identified by local residents, including the use of a land swap, and that the exit road from the south estate be designed to align with Ashley Place. Would you be happy with that, or would you want something put in about trying to keep the dam as well?
I'll keep the dam.
All right.
You know, the people get there, when they walk,
Yeah.
they see the ducks, and there were these black and white ones, don't ask me what they are, were yesterday, but there was as I said, there was a pelican there. He must have lost his radar bearings to get in there. But we think the dam, and Bob and Bruce have spent a lot of money on that dam, and it'll never overflow because it's got an overflow channel in it. And our problem with that is also the water. You know, I didn't bring that up, but the water problem we have in the estate for that drain. The road, I told you on Friday, the water has actually got onto our road in front of a house. It gets that much, but there's not going to be a water problem, they tell us.
Yep. No, that's right. So you'd really want the roundabout looked at to be
Properly.
flood-proofed.
Yeah, so it's done properly, not so that they just make them slow down. They can't, because it'll help me get out of my driveway, the roundabout, because they certainly bore around that corner. But we need it done properly. I don't know who does them, but
I'm sure we
I
can
don't want
find
it
out.
coming into my house.
That's right. I wouldn't either. And I just wanted to ask, you're actually in support of the estate going ahead, aren't you?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So it's just a couple of changes you'd like to see made to help the current residents. And I think the people you represent have made the opinion too that they're not necessarily against the estate. It's more they want just a couple of changes made.
The speed of Elevale,
Yeah.
they're just not slowing down.
Yep.
You know, it's Kelly sees it. She walks her dog all the time, and they don't slow down. The young ones, they just don't believe in slowing down. It's 50, and they just speed, and it's just got out of hand in the area.
Yep. No,
So-
no worries. Thanks for that, Bruce. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right.
Any other councillor with questions for Bruce? Councillor White.
So Bruce, you spent a fair bit of time in Traralgon, but you also spent a fair bit of time in Morwell, and historically that is. I'm not sure, quite so sure today, but Avondale Road, you familiar with that road?
Which one?
Avondale,
No, I don't know it.
down the just the other side of the Rose Garden there. As you go past the Rose Garden, we've got a road there where we've installed these traffic calming. What do they call them?
Oh,
Devices.
yeah, I know which road you mean, yes.
Which
yeah.
allows the buses to
Yeah,
go
the
through.
rubber ones, yeah.
So it stops the motor vehicles, other motor vehicles, from hooning down there, as you might say. Would that sort of concept be
Yeah,
work for
well,
you?
anything that'll slow the people down, and before that, like if you're talking east of where the roundabout in front, next to my house, having it there, something there to slow them down. They put a kink in the one in Crinigan Road. They've changed it because of the accidents in that roundabout. I don't know how much they've spent, but they've certainly put it and it's slowed them down.
That's right.
But, you know, they've got giant rocks in their front lawn now to stop them from hitting the house. You know, but I don't see anything wrong with those. Those rubber ones, you know, just they've got to do something. It's getting out of hand, you know, that, and as the gentleman said, we've had cars roll on that corner. I think it's a racetrack. Thanks, Darryl.
Okay, any other questions, councillors? No more? Thanks very much, Bruce.
Thanks, Ryan.
Our next speaker, councillors, is item 14.3. Oh, yes, we should get Councillor O'Callaghan back.
Okay. Take care, Kelly.
While we're waiting for Councillor O'Callaghan, I might as well do the setup for the next presenter. Is on item 14.3, Traralgon Courthouse Commercial Activation. The speaker is Sheridan Bond, who is Treasurer of the Friends of the Courthouse Committee, on behalf of the President of the Friends of the Courthouse Committee. If you just mark time for a moment, Sheridan, we'll have to get the missing councillor back. Yeah, no, we won't time you from now. And I won't bother you with the rules. As a former councillor, you're probably fairly familiar with them.
I think I know.
was waiting for a question on the skink, but nobody again. Sheridan, your time starts now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors, council officers and members of the community. I speak here tonight not only as a committee member of the Friends of the Courthouse, but as a member of the community with a passion to bring our heritage back to life and to return the oldest public building in Traralgon back to the community, to allow them to embrace and utilise this amazing heritage-listed building. I pass on apologies tonight from our President, Jenny Hammett, and other committee members who are unable to be here tonight. Built in 1886, the Traralgon Courthouse has seen much of Traralgon's history. If those walls could talk, I'm sure we'd hear some eye-popping stories. We have even had a few visitors come through who have said, I remember standing in that defendant's dock when I lost my licence as a young lad. And in the interest of not naming names, those people shall remain anonymous. We are a small committee, but one filled with passion to see this building become a thriving community hub. In the short time that we've taken possession of the heritage part of the building, we have held art shows, book clubs, Fair Work Commission conciliations, band rehearsals, numerous meetings and functions, and we've even had a wedding. We've also undertaken to provide Anzac Day dawn and morning service refreshments for the past 2 years, allowing the community to discover the spectacular building that the courthouse is. On days such as this, we often hear comments like, I walk past this building nearly every day and I've never ever realised how beautiful and amazing it is. It happens all the time. But unfortunately, over the years, the building has fallen into disrepair, and the opportunity to restore the heritage and make the space usable again for the community led to the establishment of the Friends of the Courthouse Committee. We welcome the proposed resolution from council officers tonight. We are excited at the prospect of incorporating the whole of the courthouse into our plans to make this a community space for all to enjoy. We are equally as excited that councillors and council officers will heighten their level of involvement and therefore increase Latrobe City Council's commitment to the livability and connectedness of the community. To this date, we have been fortunate to have had the expertise of many, including heritage architect Dan Blake from Lovell Chen in Melbourne, to provide guidance, assistance and advice with respect to the requirements under Heritage Victoria to restore and renovate the building, the existing building and the rooms. It has certainly been a labour of love for many, including members of the local community who have contributed their time, materials and expertise to the Friends of the Courthouse, from the young lad that restored the magnificent grand door handles to the ornate entrance doors, to the enthusiastic young tiler who arranged restoration of the entry floor.
Moved Councillor Harriman, seconded Councillor Clancy. Extension of time for the Speaker. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. 3
Only
minutes.
need 30 seconds, still good. Who arranged restoration of the entry floor before laying new tiles, to the hours of work that Dan Blake has put into plans and assessments and establishing a rapport between the Friends of the Courthouse and Heritage Victoria. There have been so many that have contributed time, materials and money. We thank them all. Tonight's proposed resolution will provide the Friends of the Courthouse with a clear perspective on the future and will enable an inspiring strategic plan to be developed to ensure our vision comes to life. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to stay there, Sheridan, we'll ask for questions from councillors. Councillor Clancy.
Thanks, Sharon. I just wondered if you might be able to give us a bit of an insight into that inspiring vision that the Friends have.
So, as I mentioned, it has come into quite a state of disrepair and it does need quite a lot of work. We recently applied for a grant with the LVA and were unfortunately rejected on that plan. They have encouraged us to go down the path of developing a full strategic plan, which we're actually excited about having that opportunity to sit down and do it, to bring in other members of the community to the committee and to actually form a strategic workshop so that we can plan for the real future of, and with this resolution, if this resolution was to pass, that would enable us to consider the whole of the space rather than just the heritage part. But our immediate plans, and as is highlighted in the report to you tonight, is the upgrading of the toilet facilities, and also we basically don't have a kitchen at all. It's a dining room table and a sink, and that's basically it. So we really need to bring something about in that respect, and that was our plan with the LVA grant, but unfortunately what didn't come to fruition. So hopefully if we can do this strategic direction, we can move forward.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillors, we'll now move on to notices of motion 9.1. I must make a statement at this point. I think it's very poor governance for the Mayor to move an item. So responding on behalf of a constituent, I am moving, this is the only way under the local law, item 9.1, but I'll take no further part in the debate. I'm simply moving it, and we'll go from there wherever it takes us. So I'm moving item 9.1 in relation to assistance dogs. Thank you, Councillor McFarlane. Any opposition? I note you, Councillor O'Kelly, and according to my script, it's very complicated, councillors, bear with me.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I'd be seeking your indulgence to have an amendment heard in relation to this, which, although doesn't change the intent of your notice of motion, it does add some additional items to ensure from an operational perspective we're able to enact the requirements of the legislation and give our officers some guidance.
And your amended motion is that behind me on the board? Just looking over there. Do we have a seconder for the amended motion? Councillor Gibson. Councillor O'Callaghan, as you have moved an amendment, you get the right to speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it is fair to say that the amendment does remain consistent with your intent in relation to this notice of motion, but there was a need for process and some additional mechanism to overcome some potential challenges at an operational level. In relation to the amendment, clearly we are seeking to amend our current fees and charges schedule to permit the registration of assistance dogs to the same fee level as guide dogs in relation to the application of the current principle as defined in the Commonwealth Disability Discrimination Act of 1992. The Act clearly sets out that on the basis of consideration by the states, which is where we're slightly encumbered, that these are accredited animals trained and to assist a person with a disability to alleviate the impacts of such disability. There are a range of considerations in relation to that. The animal may or may not be accredited by an organisation for regulatory purposes. The purpose of the intent of an assistance animal is to alleviate the effects of a disability, and also that the dog has been trained in an appropriate manner to meet hygiene and behavioural standards within a public place. It's also important to recognise that there is some discrepancy in the legislation in relation to self-identified processes, and we'd be seeking to overcome those. In looking to implement them, we do acknowledge that this is an interim measure. The state government is looking, or had intended to look into a review in relation to assistance animals, but at the moment there's some outliers in terms of process. The Public Transport Victoria already have a mechanism and a process which could guide us in relation to mobility, medical alert and psychiatric service support, and they have a process, application forms, etc., that could also guide the way we administer this. In relation to process, we're just seeking to make things a little more straightforward, that our Animal Welfare Advisory Committee act as a mechanism to overcome challenges that may present, and that we also seek, as highlighted by you, Mr Mayor, that we request the state government complete the review of assistant dog identification as Action 23 of absolutely everyone, the state disability plan. We believe there was an intention for this work to be undertaken. Certainly in correspondence to the Mayor, it was indicated that that was certainly intended. It just hasn't necessarily come to fruition at this point, but it would provide us with a very clear guide and some direction in terms of a more substantive process in future, but our interim measure would cover that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Ooh, well done. Thank you, Councillor O'Callaghan. I remind councillors that we are debating whether the amendment should be accepted. Then we go on to the debate when it becomes the definitive. So, Councillor Gibson, you're debating as to whether the amendment should be accepted.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. While I agree with the intent on the original, I would encourage my fellow councillors to accept the amendment because, as pointed out, it does have a lot of gaps, and I believe the amended motion would actually cover most of the gaps that have been unfortunately occurred, whatever. So I would ask you to support the motion, so no person
Motion to amend.
Yes, no person with any disability having a dog, an animal to help them with that isn't left out. Thank you.
Councillors, are there any other speakers as to whether or not the amendment should be accepted? Certainly.
Just, Mr Mayor, just wondering, would you be able to give councillors your view on why you put up the original notice of motion, your thoughts on the original notice of motion, and your views on the amendment?
I didn't want to enter into this debate, councillors. I was approached by a constituent who made the case that a properly trained dog working as a companion to a person who had a disability was in exactly the same class as a guide dog for a blind person. He feels very strongly about that, and I thought that that was something that could be tested before this council. I did have a robust discussion with some councillors about precedents around the world where pigs had been used as companion animals and llamas and all that kind of stuff. So in framing the proposal, I found as much federal and state legislation as I could find. Councillor O'Callaghan has then said to me there are still a number of holes in what you're proposing, and that she would propose to amend what it is. So it's simply an approach by a constituent who believes very strongly that this kind of animal deserves the same fee recognition as a guide dog for a blind person, and it does appear that from the letter we have from the state government, they are grappling with that problem at the moment. So, and again, I've just done what I said I wouldn't do from the chair. Which so we move on. Does any other councillor wish to speak on the amendment? If not, I'll put the amendment as proposed by Councillor O'Callaghan to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment? Okay, it's actually unanimous, isn't it? No. Yes, unanimous. All right, we'll now move on. The amendment as proposed by Councillor O'Callaghan now becomes the substantive motion.
So moved, Mr Mayor.
It has already become the motion, so you get the right to speak to it. Councillor Gibson seconded, yourself moving it. So do you wish to speak? Councillor Gibson, do you wish to speak? Any other councillor wish to speak? Opportunity is there, councillors. Councillor O'Callaghan wish to close. The amended motion is carried unanimously. I should, sorry, go around again, but the motion which is now before the council is the amended motion. Those in favour? And again, unanimous. Hopefully that's the hardest part of the meeting, councillors. We'll move on to 9.2, the Latrobe Valley Asbestos Task Force. This is a motion proposed by Councillor Law, I believe.
Correct. So moved.
You're moving that? Seconded, Councillor. Any opposition, councillors? No opposition. Councillor Law, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor. This is purely out of probably a little bit of frustration that has taken place over the last few months. The government, in its wisdom, decided to set up a task force via an election commitment to oversee the asbestos-related issues within our community and within the power stations, I should say. The whole issue with this was that, or the main mission statement or function of this group was to basically set up the safe and best work practices available by all operators so that both the public and the private wouldn't be exposed to any adverse effects from either the removable or the disposable or transport of asbestos. So it's just got to a point where an independent operator has decided to take actions upon himself outside other recommendations, which is probably within his rights, but probably not within the best interests of the community. And it's just a little bit difficult to swallow where we set up a task force to oversee the best practices for this type of material, only to be just let a private operator do exactly what he wants to do. And I just feel that if the government is going to set up a task force, they should at least allow them to make some statements and recommendations so that our community can see that not just by government but also from council that we're all working in the same direction. And I just feel that we've been let down a little bit by this local operator at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor McFarlane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think Councillor Law has spelt out what the issue is, and I refer, Mr Mayor, to the media release of the Honourable Jill Hennessy MP, Attorney General and Minister for Workplace Safety on the 28th of February in relation to the task force commencing in the Latrobe Valley. And I quote in the release, "The task force will design a plan for the management, demolition, transportation and disposal of asbestos waste material from sites including the decommissioned Hazelwood Power Station and the Energy Bricks Australia site at Morwell and ensure the community is fully engaged throughout the process." Mr Mayor, we had the CEO pointed out before the members who comprise that new task force, and it's certainly a very well-credentialed group of community and government representatives. However, in looking at the minutes of those meetings over the last few months, I can see no specific look at the matter mentioned in the media release, and that was the site including the Hazelwood Power Station and the Energy Bricks Australia. And I just believe that this council has worked hard to try and get a united approach in relation to the asbestos issue. The task force has now been formed, and I think we just need to suggest that perhaps there be a bit of a redirection to focus on what the principal issue was that commenced the process. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McFarlane. Do I have another speaker? Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I won't be as politically correct as my fellow councillors because really the task force is a joke. You heard that in before the actual election, there was talk about the task force. Now we're, end of financial year into next financial year, and what's happened? So I'm sorry, I'm not being as nice, but it is a joke. And our community deserved more. This is asbestos we're dealing with. They're supposed to be doing a task force to ensure that it is dealt with properly. And what's happening? We don't know. So to say we're a little bit let down, I think is a real understatement. I would hope that this actually encourages the government to actually do what they should be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Harriman.
Might as well have a go as well, Mr Mayor. I'd actually like to commend Councillor Law not only for this motion, but the motion he put up last year calling on the state government to actually form a task force relating to asbestos and the use of a single site. As a councillor, I'm bitterly disappointed that the minister didn't see fit after the election to call in the major users or the about to be major users of an asbestos dump and actually tell them where the state government wanted it put and to keep it, as Councillor Law had asked for, in one spot. It makes sense, the land's there, and it just shows, unfortunately, the level of care of this government to the Latrobe Valley again, and it's very, very disappointing that we have a very proactive councillor supported by this council giving them the answer to a problem and them not taking any notice. And I find that bitterly disappointing. I find it disappointing on the grounds of the community that a local voice that they've elected has given the answer to the state government and hasn't been listened to yet again. I find it really, really disappointing that we have councillors, and I include the Mayor in this, standing up demanding a solution and giving the answer to the problem of a single dump where it could be, doing all the hard work, getting the answers and almost getting a solution there, and the state government not even interested in catching the ball, let alone fumbling it when it's passed to them. So I'd like to commend Councillor Law. I think this is great. I'm bitterly disappointed that the state government didn't listen to you the first time because they needed to, and I'm hoping that the minister or at least some of her advisors understand what a good proposal this is and maybe listen to it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harriman. Any other councillor wish to speak? Yep. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hear what other councillors are saying here tonight, and I think that we need to... this is a big issue for us within Latrobe City and beyond, for that matter. And as we've heard from earlier tonight from our CEO, the group of organisations, departments who make up this particular task force is quite broad, and including reps from neighbouring municipalities as well. But in particular, we also are, as a council, represented on that task force through one of the staff of this organisation. And so, and as you probably appreciate, the task force is chaired by the Latrobe Valley Health Advocate, Jane Anderson, and has been going since about March of this year. So I think that it's a good thing that we are, if you like, emphasising our concerns here tonight. But I think also what we need to be careful here of is that we engage, with the task force to try to get a better understanding of what it is that they're trying to achieve, and to be perhaps more engaged with us insofar as getting outcomes that are going to really be in accordance with that which has been expressed by Councillor Law.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any other councillor wish to speak? Have I missed something? Okay. Any other councillor wish to speak? If not, Councillor Law, would you like to close?
Yeah, just thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to commend all our other fellow councillors. This is a highly emotive issue, asbestos. It has great ramifications. It has had great ramifications for our community for working in it for so long. And to move forward, I think we need to have up a concise and very accurate documentation and processes to deal with this type of issue. And I only hope that our state government can see the way to get this to a best practice scenario where our community feels very comfortable about the end result. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Having had speakers, councillors, we'll put this one to the vote. Those in favour: Councillor White, Councillor McFarlane, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Law, Councillor Howe, Councillor Harriman, Councillor O'Callaghan, Councillor Clancy and myself. Carried unanimously. Move on to item 10.1. Commences on page 16 of the agenda. Englobo Land application for interest waiver. have a
Happy
move?
to move, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Harriman moving, seconder. Councillor Gibson seconding. Any opposition, councillors? No opposition. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Harriman? Councillor Gibson? No speakers, no opposition. Carried unanimously. All right, we'll move on to item 14.1. Councillor Harriman, I noticed during the questioning of one of the speakers, you indicated that you may propose an alternate.
I have an alternate, if I may, Mr Mayor. Sorry, I'll let you go first, Cal.
Take that one.
Oh, okay. Well, don't worry, Darryl. It was only a procedural. I was going to ask him, did he want more time?
Very nice this time of year.
But I was in the process of asking you, do you want me to move this to the last item to give you time to write your...
No, already been done, Mr Mayor.
Already been done? On that basis, we'll wait till Councillor O'Callaghan has left the room. She has. So you are moving an alternate.
Moving an alternate, which I may have to add one bit to.
Okay.
Do I have to add the dam bit to it? Okay, I've just got an alternate that I'll add a little bit to in a minute, Mr Mayor. And if we go over the page... Oh, there we go, Mr Mayor. It's already been done. Fantastic work by the officers. How good's that? That's the alternate. It has added 4 extra points. 4 is undertake works to install a speed cushion to be included immediately east of the roundabout as practicable.
And we go to the next page, please.
Oh, sorry, I'll sit down.
Here we go. Read through them again, Councillor Harriman.
Yep. Make every attempt be made to save the 2 trees identified by local residents to our officers, including the use of land swap, if need be. Seek to have the exit road from the south estate be designed to align with Ashley Place with consideration of installing a roundabout. That's, as Mr Jeffries pointed out, the southern estate, the road comes off straight into a house, and then we have Ashley Place is 2 houses up. So if we could align that with the roundabout, it would alleviate a lot of drama to a lot of residents. I've also been informed by...
I'll give Councillor McFarlane and Councillor White the opportunity to pick the papa.
Yeah, good.
Who picked it already?
Beautiful. All right. No, to make every attempt.
Is from instead of form. Here we go.
From, the dam. That's the dam. 7.7. And consider the works required to retain the dam within the development area.
Councillor,
I am, if I may, Mr Mayor.
do you have a seconder?
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor. Yeah, I'm trying to find the name to tick them off, sorry.
That's with a D, if that helps.
D, how with a D? Okay, 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 mover and seconder, fair enough. Do we have any opposition, councillors?
I have a question though, Mr
You
Mayor.
certainly can have a question.
A question through the CEO to the planning manager just about the retention of that dam in the development area and how that would affect the overall plan, because it seems to be a large body of water over a large area of lots.
Turn my microphone on. So, through you, Mr Mayor, I had sent an email to our planning manager who did provide some alternative words in relation to that one. So, the words that were suggested were that, let me find them again, that options are considered in relation to retaining the existing dam within the development area, which is, rather than consider the works, that we actually consider some options, because it may not be totally be able to be addressed within...
Very early in the movement, so I am quite open to an amendment if you would like to consider it.
I am happy to consider that amendment, Mr Mayor.
Okay, so we might wait a moment while the item is changed. So the words were...
The team,
Words up, are they?
just a slight amendment to facilitate consideration of options rather than just consider the works required. So that may mean some modification, as I said, to the site.
We'll get this right. We'll go to you, Councillor McFarlane. seconder, are they comfortable with those word changes? Both of you are. Councillor McFarlane, question.
Just a question to the CEO, Mr Mayor. The other items there, one about the change of alignment with Ashley Place, etc., that doesn't complicate the endorsement of the development plan?
Ask the CEO.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I might need to pass that one to our planning manager who is at the back of the room. I think he has a microphone ready.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. These changes in terms of their investigation, I would be of the consideration that we could consider it as generally in accordance with the development plan. So subject to detailed design and consideration at the future planning permit stage. I think it can be considered through that. So there isn't any formal need of changing the development plan because any subsequent subdivision, etc., has to be generally in accordance with it as opposed to exactly the same. So things like consideration about the retaining of trees could be considered within the reserve, etc. The detailed design could consider speed management in terms of traffic hubs, etc. And the roundabout could also be considered as part of that process. So I'm comfortable to say that we can consider it as part of being generally in accordance with it as part of the detailed design stage.
Comfortable with that?
Thank you.
Councillor Clancy, you indicated that you hadn't received a complete answer. Would you like to rephrase?
I hadn't. I might rephrase. So, and I noticed that the Jody's just mentioned about the trees could be retained and the roundabouts and everything. My concern and my question would be how, if we were to retain that body of water, how does that affect the overall plan? And by that I mean, are we losing 10 lots, 20 lots, 5 lots, no lots, and knowing that we're only at draft stage?
Okay. Question comes...
Can you hear me?
Excuse me a second, Jody. The question comes to me. I defer to the CEO and you might like to throw it to Jody.
I might, Mr Mayor, hand it over to our planning manager, Jody Wooden. Thank you, Jody.
Through you, Mr Mayor, again. Look, obviously it's difficult to consider at this point in time what actual impact in terms of loss of lots, etc. As part of detailed design, you're always going to have to do some detailed design engineering considerations, etc. Removing the dam is probably the key point that needs a lot more investigation. The roundabout itself, in terms of the road reserve, could be managed quite easily. The protection of the trees and keeping them within reserves, that probably is not going to have a major impact. But the dam would require a lot of investigation. It may not change it substantially, but it might move where the lots need to be located, etc. And it might change the level of, say, for instance, the drainage reserve and the future reserve for council as well. So that, if there was one change, that's probably the one that's likely to require a bit more detailed investigation, yes.
Councillor Clancy, are you comfortable with that answer? Okay. Any further questions while we're on it, councillors? No. I did have, there are no indications of opposition. So on that basis, Councillor Harriman, do you wish to move? Well, you've moved, you should speak, sorry. Yeah. Councillor Howe? Councillors, any councillor wish to speak? As there has been no opposition and no speakers, councillors, we'll take it as the alternate motion is carried unanimously. Item 14.2, councillors, on page... Oh, I'm trying to make the meeting shorter. By the time I've gone through the spiel, she'll be back. Item 14.2 on page 205 of the agenda. An item very close to Councillor O'Callaghan's heart, so we should wait for it. You're effectively addressing item 14.2. There was a slight discrepancy in the wording of the recommendation, and the officers have changed the recommendation just to make it clear as to what the intent was, and it was where the matter was to be referred to. It just said refers the matter rather than refer it to where it should go. So that's the only change in the wording you've got there. So I'll give you a second to read the slight change. Councillor O'Callaghan moving, obviously. Do I have a second to Councillor Gibson? You've got to allow me time to speak, people. Okay. Do I have any opposition? No opposition. Councillor O'Callaghan, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, I was just rising to allow Councillor McFarlane the option if he wanted as one of them all councillors, but that was all. But that's fine, I'll take it. So in terms of this the officer's recommendation relates to the work that we've previously discussed in council in relation to the pound. The initial indicative figure for the works to be undertaken has exceeded that which would be required for us to complete the work, so it won't allow us to undertake it. We can't stage based on the level of resourcing we would have previously had allocated, so there would need to be consideration in relation to a surplus bid. This is why it is back before council, but basically this is to consider construction of the outdoor exercise yards that we'd previously considered, communal cat cage, and spaces that we could more adequately utilise to improve the pound facility that we currently have. We did give due consideration to opportunities for partnering with other organisations who also have expertise in relation to the provision of this service. Unfortunately, the nature of the resourcing that would be required to undertake that would far exceed our capacity to deliver upon that service on an ongoing basis within Latrobe City. So this is a measure that we can consider resourcing down the track so that we're able to continue to provide a service that meets the requirements, but also one that meets community expectations in terms of provision of the facility. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Callaghan. Councillor Gibson.
Just really quickly, Mr Mayor, this is all about making sure that we're doing it properly. That's it.
That's it? Oh, good. Yeah. Any other councillor wish to speak? Didn't even get off the grid. No other councillor wishing to speak. Councillor O'Callaghan, do you wish to close? No, close. Having had speakers, councillors, we will have to put it to the vote. Those in favour, Councillor White, Councillor McFarlane, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Law, Councillor Howe, Harriman, Callaghan, Councillor Clancy and myself, carried unanimously. Moving over to 14.3, councillors, which appears on page 224 of your agendas. Trogan Courthouse commercial activation.
Moving, Mr Mayor.
Moving Councillor Clancy, mover. Seconding.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Excuse me. Any opposition, councillors? No opposition. Councillor Clancy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This resolution in front of council endorses proceeding with the upgrade of the toilets and the decking.
Councillor, could I just ask you to hold for a second?
Yes, absolutely. I will hold.
A fuffle has broken out on my right.
It's always that side.
Certainly. Can we scroll through so we can see both pages, please? And then scroll back to the top.
If you'd extend me 3 minutes, I'll read the whole thing to you if you want.
Yeah, maybe easier. Sorry, would you like... Councillor Clancy.
Oh yes, you're in this.
Would you like to start again? My apologies.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So this proposed resolution in front of council endorses proceeding with the upgrading of the toilets and the decking, as it says at the top of the resolution there. But the main part of this, and as Ms Bond has spoken to tonight, this allows the Friends of the Courthouse group to take over the commercial activation of the courthouse. Now, for people who mightn't be aware, the Trogan Courthouse has been broken into two halves, which is the heritage side of it and then the commercial side of it, which we'd refer to as the newer side. When the Friends of the Courthouse took their lease, they took the heritage side only. They did initially, and I'll look back, their initial expressions of interest was to take over both. And council went through a expression of interest to see if there was a cafe owner or someone that might have wanted to take that commercial side, and all negotiations and expressions of interest that went forward fell through. and this has left the space unoccupied. So the Friends of the Courthouse are interested in that space, and this revises their lease to activate the commercial space of the Traralgon Courthouse to take both sides of it. So the Friends of the Courthouse will take over both sides. This resolution also puts council into the mix in the Friends of the Courthouse. So it includes a condition in the revised lease that there'll be 3 places on the Friends of the Courthouse committee. And this is Councillor Howe and myself, with a proxy of Councillor Harriman and Councillor O'Callaghan in the event that we can't make it. Now, these are not memberships of the committee, but really a conduit back to council. So council is fully aware of what the Friends of the Courthouse are planning to do with the space for the community, and have a nice conduit between the community and back to the council group. It should be noted that the manager of arts and events will also sit on that. So there'll be quite, it's not just saying here's your lease and away you go, see if you can do your best job, to actively engage with the Friends and the committee there to ensure that it is going to be the absolute best that it can possibly be. They've done a fantastic job in their limited lease that they've had so far, and as Ms Bond's actually listed through her things with the things like the art shows and the wedding and the band rehearsals and Anzac Day service as well. It's been very, very active in the time that they've been there, and this revised lease and this resolution will ensure that they move forward for what is one of the most beautiful buildings in our municipality. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Councillor Clancy. Beautifully timed.
4 seconds to go.
Yeah. Councillor Howe.
Just briefly, Mr Mayor, I agree 100% with what Councillor Clancy has said. We've got a very passionate group that's got a long-term plan of how to use the courthouse. We've gone out to the public twice to try and get an expression of interest in the business side or the non-heritage side of the building, with no luck. I've seen what they've done with the half they've got. I can't wait to see what they're going to be able to do with the whole lot. Really looking forward to being on the committee and working with them. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Any other councillor wish to speak? On that basis, Councillor Clancy, you get a chance again.
Thank you. And at the risk of introducing new material to my closing, I was remiss of me not to congratulate the Friends of the Courthouse Incorporated on the work that they have done. So I should pass that along in the absence of many of your members tonight who are off doing other things at other committees around our area. So congratulations to the work that they have done. Look forward to the strategy that goes forward as well, and thank you very much for all the work you've done so far.
Thank you, Councillor Clancy. No opposition but speakers. We will have to record our votes. Those in favour: Councillor White, Councillor McFarlane, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Law, Councillor Howe, Councillor Harriman, Councillor Callaghan, Councillor Clancy and myself. Carried unanimously. Move on to item 15.1 on page 237. This is one... Yes, you have, yeah. This is item 15.1, councillors. The CEO delegation to award 2019-20 road rehabilitation program contracts. Excuse me. Councillor Harriman has declared a conflict, but I've got a mover in ahead of me. So Councillor McFarlane is moving. Second. Councillor White to second. Any opposition, councillors? Excuse me. No opposition. Councillor McFarlane.
No, thank you.
Doesn't wish to speak. Councillor White.
Oh,
Why not?
why not?
Why not?
No, I think it's worth saying a couple of words on this one, because I think that the message needs to be made abundantly clear that the purpose of going down this path, as is recommended in this resolution, is to try and get a benefit of savings and more interest from contractors in relation to these sorts of projects, and to have it on a grand, have projects that are, if you like, packaged projects. The response has been different to that which would have otherwise been the case.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any other councillor wish to speak? If not, Councillor McFarlane, do you wish to close? Okay. Had speakers, but no opposition, so we will have to record our vote. Those in favour: Councillor White, Councillor McFarlane, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Law, Councillor Howe, Councillor Harriman not there, Councillor Callaghan, Councillor Clancy and myself. Carried. Move on to item 15.2 on page 241, when Councillor Harriman returns. Councillors, this is 15.2 that's up there at the moment. While Councillor Harriman is coming through, I will point out, councillors, that again the officers have had, on the recommendation, made a very minor wording change. We all understand what referring a matter relates to, but just to make it clear for the gallery, it actually points out in 3 where the matter is to be referred to. However, I believe there is a possibility of an alternate motion on this one.
Yes. I'd like to move an alternate motion, please, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. The alternate motion, if we could ask, is that the alternate motion? Yeah. Just seconding it.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Just making sure it's on the screen, that's all. Move second. Everybody comfortable with the wording of the alternate, or do you want the officers to scroll through again? Everybody's comfortable? On that basis, do I have any opposition? No opposition, councillors. Councillor Howe? You certainly can. It is your right.
Sorry. Just a question in relation to the fourth dot point there. On the alternate motion that we have before us. Would it, with the previous ones that we've had, have we not referred the suggestion? Anyway, perhaps I'll wait to hear what the mover of the motion has to say.
Well, your question was directed to me. I will refer it on to an officer to respond, or have you decided to withdraw the question?
Well, I just really wanted to understand, and perhaps I've been jumped the gun here in relation to allocation of 66 grand, the current accumulated unallocated cash surplus, whereas in previous matters we've dealt with this evening, we've referred these matters to a meeting for that to be weighed up.
So your question is, what is the normal practice?
Yes.
Okay, Mr CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So in this instance, it's indicating that council actually allocate those funds rather than referring it to a future process. So on occasion that has been the case by council to just actually directly allocate the funds. For the other motions you did see tonight, though, that was simply a referral of those funds to a future process to be considered at that point in time. So effectively, if this was accepted by council as proposed, that fund would be allocated and then it would be utilised, addressed through the budget process as already being allocated.
Perhaps Councillor Howe will explain in more detail. Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Okay, just explaining briefly to the gallery, the funds that we're talking about here, we give to our rural committees of Crown Land and for our recreation reserves to maintain and improve our facilities. As an example, we have the Traralgon Railway Reserve in Traralgon. We fund them and then they decide how they want to develop the reserve, where to put the plants, where to put the bird boxes, because they know what they're doing a lot better than the average worker for the Latrobe City. It gets the job done a lot better and a lot more efficient. So what we're talking about is the funds that we're giving them at the moment is inadequate to be able to maintain the facilities. Over the years, we're getting ageing facilities. Our facilities are growing. We've got more kids being involved, playing sports. So what we need to do is reassess what we're giving these committees to be able to maintain the reserves. It's really a false economy. If we don't give them enough, all we're doing is letting the reserves run down, the pavilions run down, which means that eventually we're going to have to spend a lot more in bringing them up to scratch. What I've asked in number 3 is to revise the current Category C classification of the Traralgon South Recreation Oval to a Category B. When you compare what compare what they're getting to the other reserves of equivalent sports and size played on them, they are about $5,000 or $6,000 less. You have to remember that these facilities are maintained 12 months of the year. They're not only used for sport, they're used for the public as general recreation areas. They walk their dogs on it, they play, they have picnics, etc. So what I've asked is that they change the C classification to a B classification for their main oval. They play A-grade cricket on the oval. It has got a turf wicket, so it does fall in line with the other facilities of similar usage. That will then put them up to approximately $21,000 a year, which they can then use to maintain their reserve. Number 4 is the allocation to the 1920 financial year. When we went through the budget, I did make a point of asking if we could have some unallocated funds left there, because I knew this process was taking place and it wasn't ready in time when we were doing the budget. So now that it's here, I'd just like the council to remember that and to allocate it for the current financial year. And finally, option number 6 is to consider a further report for their water usage. At the moment, each reserve has their water usage is treated differently, I suppose. The council's paying for some, and with others, they're paying the full amount. There's some situations we're paying them $15,000 to maintain the reserve, and they're spending $7,000 or $8,000 on the water.
We'll stretch it by a whisker. How long have you got to go?
I've never got to 3 minutes before, so I don't know what to do. And just as a note, all the facilities in our major towns, we pay for their water bill completely, so it doesn't come out of the reserves pocket. So that's a piece of work that will get done hopefully in the future, and we can then have a consistent approach across all reserves. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Harriman.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think Councillor Howe has hit the nail on the head with a number of issues. I've had a number of community groups that are looking after some of these facilities and grounds and trails and reserves. And as Councillor Howe pointed out, water is one of the biggest issues. There's some grounds we're actually paying for it. In our larger centres, it tends to be in the smaller towns and the outer areas that for some reason we're not. We give them a grant to look after the grounds. 50% of the money going in equivalent would be by volunteers providing their own time. It's nothing to see in some of these outlying towns that the committee is actually out there mowing the grass themselves, that they're out seeding, that they're scarring the surface in the off-season, that they're reseeding. We have a huge issue with some of these reserves with capeweed, which is taking over the grounds in summer because the grass is dying off because they can't afford to water it enough, because if they water it too much, they're going to have no money left for the work needed to upkeep the grounds during the year. So I fully endorse Councillor Howe on that one, and I think the Caligny and Trelgan South Sporting Facility, there's actually 2 grounds they're looking after that are separated. They're not in the same town, which makes it twice as hard. It's twice the work that they've got to do. They're trying to transport equipment to look after the grounds from Trelgan South out to Caligny and back again. And the fact that they play A-grade cricket on it and it was receiving less money than other grounds where we provide the same service, I think is something that needs to be looked at. So I fully support Councillor Howe on this and ask my other councillors to support it as well.
Thank you, Councillor Harriman. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Clancy.
I'll have a go. Thank you, Mr Mayor. The adoption or endorsement of the annual maintenance grant is what we're talking about here. It's very, very important. I congratulate Councillor Howe for seeing this through. This isn't the first time he's spoken on this, and it's not the last, I'm sure. It's about equity, and it's also about keeping up. You know, if our grant is the grant amount, the allocation of funds is the same every year, yet the cost of materials goes up, the cost of labour goes up. We haven't been keeping up, so unfortunately some reserves have been falling away, and the groups are feeling that frustration. So being able to catch up, and this won't be the first catch up, this is where we play, this is where we spend our time. These are the areas of our municipality that we actually need to keep up, and we need to make sure that they are in tip-top order. the groups, the volunteers who are working on these grounds need to know that we value what they do, and we need to be able to allocate the correct amount of money for them to do that. The equity in water use is something that will need to come back and will probably need a little bit more work on, but certainly endorse the idea that we look at that further to ensure that groups aren't spending all their hard-earned sausage and pie money on water on the grounds when we could be looking at other alternatives, whether it be tanks or whether it be bore water or other options that we might have. So this is good work. This is a good recommendation that Councillor Howe's put up, an alternate motion, and I fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor Clancy. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor White?
Yep. So, Mr Mayor, I guess that first of all, another question in a way in relation to item 6 on this report. I'm thinking of, for example, Councillor Howe, you're talking about about water costs for particular all the rec reserves that we have and how that they sort of covered and etc. But then I think also that I know, for example, Gaskin 2 at Churchill, there's no water supply to that reserve at the moment, and so during the summer season, it really burns off. So we've got, that's an issue that perhaps maybe be picked up in this process anyway. But the other thing I just particularly wanted to endorse was the remarks made in relation to all those folk out there who voluntarily giving up a heck of a lot of their time to supplement the funds that we make available to these recreation reserves, and in order for them to be able to provide the opportunity for our community in the various locations throughout our municipality for them to pursue active recreation and in all sorts of ways. And I think that that's the particular point I want to emphasise, that the volunteers we have in our community are a very important part of the fabric of our community, and we need to send the signal to them that we are supportive of them and what it is they're doing, and if we can assist them further by a further allocation of funds that's going to support the work they do, I think that's all a very good thing.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any other councillor wish to speak? No one else? Councillor Howard, do you wish to close? Okay. Having had speakers, councillors, we need a vote. Those in favour, Councillor White, Councillor McFarlane, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Law, Councillor Howard, Councillor Harriman, Councillor Callaghan, Councillor Clancy and myself, carried unanimously. Moving on to 16.1 on the agenda, councillors, location of the mobile maternal and child health services commences on page 264. I note you, Councillor Callaghan. I take it. I think I missed what happened there. Who moved it?
Councillor McFarlane was in.
Councillor McFarlane is moving. Councillor O'Callaghan is the seconder. Do I have any opposition, councillors? No opposition. Councillor McFarlane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report comes forward after a fairly lengthy deliberation on the Morwell Maternal and Child Health Service, which for many, many years was located in Vincent Road, a real access issue for a lot of our residents, and in more recent times has been located at the Mid-Valley Shopping Centre. And whilst that certainly has assisted from an access point of view, along with that location has been some challenges, particularly in relation to space, privacy and some of those other issues. Our staff have consulted considerably with the users of the service, and we've looked at a number of options, and it would appear that the best option would be to relocate the service into the Morwell Library, which is council-owned building, as we're aware of, so we won't have ongoing lease payments in relation to that. It's in a location that is fairly accessible, and a lot of our community access that location. So I'm very pleased, Mr Mayor, that the level of consultation that has occurred in this, and the level of discussion that it's received, and hopefully the the resolution gives us the best outcome for the future. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McFarlane. Councillor O'Callaghan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Further to Councillor McFarlane's comments, this certainly is the best possible option for us at this point in time. Whilst Mid-Valley does provide a range of services, it certainly doesn't allow us the flexibility for supportive families that we need, and it also does present some difficulties, as Councillor McFarlane alluded, in relation to the size of the facility, the capacity to stay in place in that location because of the nature of the agreement, but also privacy for those families wanting to access and use the entirety of that space. This recommendation from the officers, and I do want to commend Kate Kerslake, our Acting General Manager of Community Services, for suggesting this be an option considered, and for the subsequent recommendation and exploration with stakeholders, because it not only complements the requirements of our maternal and child health service, but also offers us the opportunity for a partnership between our fantastic crew at the Morwell Library to support our early years services team in terms of connectedness and a greater focus on early childhood literacy, which we are committed to across not only Living Well Latrobe, but our early years and children's services plans. There were some questions raised around whether or not the new development of the Morwell Central Primary School would be an option for co-location for us. Unfortunately, the school have indicated that there will not be the option for a permanent facility to be located there. However, we may be able to provide some in or outreach depending on their requirements, and we will consider that into the future. But this was a decision we needed to take with some level of priority to ensure some consistency of service and sustainability for the service we need to provide on an ongoing basis. We will continue to have conversations with Morwell Central Primary School around needs of that immediate cohort in their early years services as well. So very happy to commend this report to my colleagues. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Callaghan. Any other councillor wish to speak? If not, Councillor McFarlane, close. Decline to close. Having had speakers, councillors, we have to record a vote. Those in favour, Councillor White, Councillor McFarlane, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Law, Councillor Howe, Councillor Harriman, Councillor O'Callaghan, Councillor Clancy and myself, carried unanimously. Moving on to item 17.
Yeah. I've decided that I'm going to declare a conflict of interest on this report.
Yeah, okay. And you will leave the chamber. Right. The item is 17.1, long-term lease, Ausnet Electrical Service Substation in the Trogan Sports Stadium, or Trogan Sports Stadium redevelopment. It's on page 282 of the agenda. Do I have a mover?
Happy to move, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Howe. Seconder? Councillor Harriman. Any opposition, councillors? No opposition. Councillor Howe?
Just briefly, as part of the Trogan Sports Stadium redevelopment, we need to upgrade the electricity going into there. To do that, this is just to start the process. We need to be able to lease some land, 6 metres by 10 metres, so they can upgrade the facilities. Really, if we want our children not to play in the dark, play netball and basketball in the dark, it really needs to go ahead. So, more than happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Harriman? Okay, reserve. I think you're going to be lucky. Any other councillor wish to speak? No councillor wishing to speak. That puts you in the position of having reserved as having to speak. Okay, decline. Councillor Howe, do you wish to close? Okay, unfortunately, with Councillor Howe having spoken, we have to put it to the vote, councillors. So those in favour, Councillor McFarlane, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Law, Councillor Howe, Councillor Harriman, Councillor O'Callaghan, Councillor Clancy and myself, carried. Move on to item 17.2, establishment of Road and Place Name Advisory Committee on page 288 of your agenda, councillors. Do I have a mover? Oh, he's such a nuisance. For the minutes. For the minutes. Yeah, I probably could get one actually. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor White has returned to the chamber. We're at item 17.2, establishment of Road and Place Name Advisory Committee. Do I have a mover? Councillor Gibson, you got up first. Councillor White, I'll put you down as the seconder. Any opposition? No opposition. Councillor Gibson. Procedural. Okay. That's your opinion too, Councillor White? Okay. Yeah, with that. I was certain he was going to speak. No speakers, Councillor. No opposition. Carried unanimously. Moving on to 17.3, tabling of Assembly of Councillor records. Do I have a mover for that one, please? Councillor Gibson.
Move.
Seconder. Councillor Law. Opposition? None. Nobody wishes to speak. Carried unanimously. Councillors, are there any items of urgent business? Nobody wishing to raise urgent business? Move on to meeting closed to the public. Do I have a mover? I'll go with you this time, Councillor White, and Councillor Gibson as seconder. Any opposition? No opposition. Nobody wishing to speak. On that basis, I'll declare that carried. For members of the gallery, we're going into closed session now, but we'll wait 10 minutes to have a cup of tea and a biscuit with you. Thank you.